Am I your only face-to-face class this semester?
No. You're the only one that's face-to-face every single class period.
Okay.
I have two that I show up one day a week for instead of both days.
I see. You what? Hybrid. Okay. You only show up to this one? Alright. Is that a compliment? Yeah, those lecture notes I've been giving you, they're so dense and intense. We haven't even started one of them. So today's goal is just to get through one of them, to experiment and see if I can stop being so long-winded and just get to the point. I am going to have a little introduction, but you know how I introduce it, right? Some reflections and things like that. But very quickly, we're going to experiment and see if we can get through the first lecture notes, and then I'll be better prepared for next class. We can get through the ontological argument, and then maybe one or two of the lecture notes, and then we'll be caught up. Yeah.
So on the syllabus, it says it's next Monday.
So let's go through the syllabus now, because I thought that I had said September 14th is when your first paper is due. Maybe I changed it, or maybe let's see.
I had it written down for the 7th.
Uh-huh.
But that was also the first time I looked at the syllabus. I know you updated the syllabus, so.
Okay, I'm open the syllabus right now. We're gonna look together.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it wouldn't be fair to have you do it too soon. You're getting used to the class. So I think I changed it to be the first assignment due on September 14th. Let's see if that's true. And I think I sent an email, a Blackboard announcement saying, please download the new syllabus, right? You remember me sending out something like that?
You did.
Okay, you see what it says? SA1, when is it due? Yeah, I want to bring that to everyone's attention. This is very important. Because the class is just beginning, I want you guys to get used to me and used to how the class is going and everything. So I planned the first essay to be due on the 14th. Is that cool? You feel like that's like enough time? Okay, cool. So that's almost a month in. Yep. Sorry, what? No, I'm still designing those. Don't worry. Each one of the essays is worth 25 points. The questions will be structured in such a way that there will be 5 questions, each worth 5 points. I already know the structure, but I want to make it as poetic as possible and really provoke you to think. So I want to really craft each question, make it short, but make it really deep. And then you spend the rest of the essay responding, but using some of the thoughts and methods we've talked about. Yeah, next week, probably Monday. Yeah, I think 2 weeks should be long enough, right? Because they're only 4 pages long, double spaced. Yeah, so I think I'll have it up. I'll send an email out. I'll send a Blackboard announcement by Sunday midnight. Is that cool? All right. Ladies and jelly spoons, how's it going? Good? Had a good week? What is today, Monday? You had a good weekend? Oh, that's cool, man. Are theaters open right now with COVID? Huh? Not in Miami? Okay. I don't even know, like, I don't get any advertisements about what's going on. Like, is the movie industry just pretty much shut down right now? No, I don't mean the theaters. I mean like Hollywood. Are they even making movies? Oh, okay, cool. All right. And I guess like Hulu and Netflix is still probably going, huh? All right, cool. All right, guys. So welcome back to a new week together. And yeah, so thank you for reminding me about the due dates and stuff. I'll try to give you I'll try to give you 2 weeks to prepare for the assignments. That should be more than enough for 4 single-spaced pages, right? And yeah, and each of the topics will be on different subjects we've covered, and they'll go deep. And there'll be opportunities for you to write what you care about, but you have to think, what are the implications of what I care about? And am I really committed to those implications? Are some of those implications contradictory? Do I need to revise my stance? Am I becoming more conscious of certain things, either my own biases or my own prejudices, whatever? A lot of the things I think, are they justified, unjustified? That's all we're doing in the class, really, you know? It's just that we're going through a lot of content that's interesting and provocative, and will hopefully elicit from you deeper thoughts about certain things. All right. So today, I'm going to try and get through the goal of today. Our goal today is to try and get through one of those notes that I give you as supplementary reading. I've noticed that we've been focusing a lot on the actual readings, but these supplementary notes are going to help you so much with these essays you have to write, because they're going to make you think out of the box, expand your horizons, make you think about other implications of these little readings. As I said before, the readings are essential. Some of the best philosophy is written philosophy. Plato, who we read for the Apology of Socrates, before he met Socrates, he was a tragedy artist. He was like Aeschylus and Sophocles and Euripides. He was promising, he was a great writer. But he met Socrates and he burned his early plays. He burned his tragedies. He was like, I'm doing philosophy. I'm not going to do this mediocre stuff anymore. But guess what? When he wanted to write about Socrates, he did it very artistically in beautiful dialogues. So he still found a place for art in philosophy, even though in his dialogues, he criticizes art a lot. We won't have time to go all the way into it, but he doesn't like art. He thinks there's something wrong with art. Let's put it this way. Plato believes that the metaphysical world is the true world, and this world is just like an inferior copy of the real world. So that already implies that whenever something is a copy, it's kind of inferior, right? Now, what is an artist according to Plato? He's the person who copies the copy. He takes a landscape or a portrait, and that's a copy of an apparent thing, right? But the apparent thing is already just a copy of something metaphysical. So one of the big reasons why Plato has a problem with art, it's inferior, man. It's nothing but imitation, cheap imitation. If you want true beauty, don't look at the copies. Don't look at the paintings in the museums. If you want true beauty, don't even look at the real world. Go to the metaphysical world, the world of the soul and God and that kind of thing. Does it make sense? All right. All right, guys. I said I was going to try and get through one of these documents. So let's see if we can do it. All right. So just a couple of things I wanted to drop. What I'm going to be trying to do, guys, as you've noticed, as we go through the class, I'm going to try and provoke you to think really deep about certain things and introduce each class with a kind of motivation or inspiration, and then try and get through one of these documents at least each class. So today's inspiration, I'm going to try and go through it really quick, but these are things that are going to help you think deeper about these essays. So right now, I am going to complicate your lives a little bit because I've been telling you that philosophy is this great thing, right? Well, I'm going to be a little bit critical. I'm going to do some critical thinking about philosophy, and I'm going to be a bit deflationary. I'm going to complicate your lives a little bit because I'm going to suggest that the value of philosophy might not be absolute. It might not be that great. It actually depends on what is needed and when we need that thing. So relevance is not an absolute thing. You know what I mean? Some things are relevant in some contexts at some times, and other things are relevant at others. And a lot of stuff is just irrelevant in many given situations, right? Now, if philosophy is really about wisdom, this means that if you're going to live a truly human life, a flourishing life, either a lot of times in your life you're not going to be living the life of a philosopher, or it's going to mean that to truly live the life of a philosopher, you first got to be human and fully human first. And then philosophy only enriches you in the context of your being fully human, all right? So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. One of the great things about the internet is unlimited storage, right? And what are we storing on the internet? Information. Now, if a philosopher is just a person who carries around a lot of information, I think he's useless today, right? You can see why, right? If he's carrying around the same thing you can find on the internet, he's just a walking, talking encyclopedia, right? There's no value added. So maybe a philosopher is still valuable today, but it's certainly not as a storage mechanism. Back when you needed oral tradition, before you had writings, maybe a philosopher back then was useful because he had memory. He memorized things, right? He preserved traditions. But we don't need that now. I want to suggest to you that right now, with something like the internet and unlimited storage, encyclopedic storage of data and information is not as needed anymore. And what we need now are insightful and enriching perspectives on things. We need people who can add value, not by regurgitating and repeating things. We need people who add value by introducing different perspectives, looking at things from different angles and different aspects. That enriches things. Look at science from the perspective of art. Look at art from the perspective of science. Look at knowledge from the perspective of life. Do you see how that interdisciplinary perspective enriches things? All right? Second thing, philosophy, like religion, exists in part for us to live a life that is more conscious, more caring, more mature, and more humane. Remember what I told you about Socrates? Yeah, sure. Philosophy, like religion, exists in part for us to live a life that is more conscious, more caring, more mature, and more humane. I think you can see that with Socrates, right? Remember what we talked about Socrates? He cares. He's like Jesus, not in all respects, but he's analogous enough that if we think about philosophy, we should be thinking about someone who has a very noble and humane mission or function in the culture. I want to share a little bit with you. My own journey towards consciousness or wokeness, I am a teacher. I consider myself a teacher. And so I immerse myself in different ways of teaching effectively and things like that, and educational culture. And a little fun fact about me is that before I started the semester, one of the things I did is the whole week before, every day for 4 days, I would watch a different movie, a different inspirational movie about teaching. And there are 4 teaching movies that I really love. One of them is called Lean on Me. And it's it's starring Morgan Freeman. And it's a really, really good movie. If you get a chance, check it out. Another one is called Freedom Writers. It's really about the inner city struggle and educating a bunch of inner city kids. Another one is called Dead Poet Society. You remember the late, oh my gosh, what's his name? Robin Williams, yeah. He did an excellent, excellent job in that. And then the last one is a British movie called History Boys. Wonderful. Very, very good. So guys, I just hope that you find something like that in your own lives where even before you start it, you're already inspired and you're passionate about it and you care about it. And that's the kind of thing that'll pull you through life and make your life meaningful and worth living. So philosophy really is about that kind of thing, identifying those things. I want to suggest to you that every great teacher is actually full of something that's more precious than intellect or being smart. Every great teacher is full of soul. They're very soulful, very conscious, very woke. The Buddha and Socrates and Lao Tse and Christ were great teachers. Christ was a rabbi. Christ at age 13 knew more scripture than most members of the congregation. I can't remember which part of the Gospels that in, but it's there. Like he knew the scripture well. And he was teaching in the synagogue at like 13 or 14. So he was a great teacher. And the mission of a teacher is to fellowship with others, to wake them up and make them more conscious of their soul and its wonderful political, ethical, and metaphysical affairs. Mediocre teaching happens when the teacher is not fully woke and gets lost in details and technicalities and pedantry and trivia. This pandemic is a time to reflect, become more conscious, mindful, real, woke, focus on what we really care about and what really matters. Guys, there is some deep stuff that philosophy can offer. I'm about to give you one of the deepest things you can think about. Think about this thing I'm calling metaphysics. And think about what I'm going to tell you right now. Distributional metaphysics. What is distributional metaphysics? Well, it's asking the question, why are things distributed the way that they are? And here's what I mean by that. Why did that happen to me? And why did it happen just when and where and how it happened? You see what I mean by distributional? Why did she come into my life then and not now? Why did I lose the promotion then and not then? Guys, that's metaphysics. It's not the kind of metaphysics that people focus on. A lot of metaphysics focus on God. But think about God. If God is the creator and sustainer and administrator of this world, and everything he does is with a plan and a purpose, that means there are no mistakes, right? Well, that means wherever you are right now, its distribution is perfect. What does that mean? You are right where you're supposed to be, even if you haven't realized it. Do you see that? But that's still a kind of religious kind of philosophy. If we take the scientific philosophy and we follow evolution and Darwin, do we get the same result? What happens to distributional metaphysics under science? What do you think? Go ahead. Sorry, what? Okay. Let's see. Thanks for letting me know. I think you go to the top where it says you were in J. Oh, okay, great. Okay, participants 1. Okay. So this has been working fine. Like last class, we had 10 participants and a lot of them stayed on for 40, 50 minutes, some the whole time. So I just assumed everything was okay.
Go and see the people in the waiting room.
Huh. There's only one participant. Hmm. Is there a way to send a message or something? Hmm? And also ask them if there's another room available. Maybe what I did, huh? There's only one room? They're waiting to be let in? Oh. Okay. So, you see, it was my understanding that for synchronous meetings, all they have to do is do a simple step. Press join meeting, and that's it. I've spoken with other people who use Zoom, and I've asked them, is there anything I need to do on my part? And they said, no, joining is automatically. It's kind of set up that way, you know? All the participants are a part of it. They just have to join, and that's it. So I'm just wondering now, and they did join last class and the other one. So I'm just wondering what's different this time, you know? So they're in a waiting room? I think the one we're in is this one right here. Meeting ID number 930 560 6837. Could you do me a favor? Are you able to text your friend? Yeah. Could you ask her if she can find her meeting ID, or ask her if she's in the meeting from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Because there's another one that overlaps 6:30 to 7:45, and maybe they're in that one. Has what?
When I go on Zoom, it's saying the one that's supposed to join is 917. I think you're all on that one.
The one what?
No, the one that, online it says 972 for you guys, at the starting, so I think they're in that one. I think one's done that.
Great. Could you send a message to your friend, maybe to log out and then log back in, and then log into the one that has a meeting ID beginning with 930. Oh, it's not visible.
No, only the top one.
Personal room.
Maybe you try joining it, probably.
Yeah, same thing as when I go on Zoom, the code is at the top.
Sorry, what?
When I go on Zoom, the code that has mine is the code, the keyboard and my keyboard.
So you're saying the one that I'm using now isn't even visible?
No.
Okay, so now I have to think because we want to preserve the recording. So if I switch to another one, it might get divided up or it might get lost. Huh. And I haven't figured out how to send a message either to everybody. Has your friend logged out and then logged back in?
Yeah, but the only one that's popping up for her is the one that you're not. It's the same thing for me. So even if it goes and it's the other one,
All right, guys. So I'll have to address this to the synchronous people after we're done. I'm just going to send out an email apologizing, saying I'm going to work on it, and it's in my best interest to do the best I can and record a high quality thing and make it available as soon as possible. If you could just let her know that and ask her if she can share that. One thing I'm going to work on is figuring out why there are overlapping meetings. We should all be in the same one. And the second thing I'm going to figure out by next class is how to have a direct conversation with the participants and just let them know, here's what's going on, here's what you need to do. If there's some sort of chat room or, you know what I mean?
yeah, there actually is a chat room that goes with it. Just so you know, for future reference, if you go on for the meeting ID that matches up with the meeting that you join, should be the same. So you can go on Blackboard and do a first meeting, but as long as it's the same meeting ID, I think everyone should be able to join.
Okay, great. All right, so we're just gonna, if you can let her know, we're just gonna record as best we can, make it available, and thank her for her patience. All right. All right, guys, where were we? So I was, trying to finish up this little talk. The mission of a teacher, like all these great people, Buddha, Socrates, Lao Tse, Christ, they were great teachers and they were great souls. And the mission of a teacher is to fellowship with others and try as much as possible to wake them up and make them more conscious of their soul and its wonderful political, ethical, and metaphysical affairs. Mediocre teaching happens when the teacher is not fully awoke and gets lost in details, technicalities, pedantry, and trivia. And I want to suggest to you that this pandemic is a time to reflect, become more conscious and mindful and real and woke, and to focus on what we really care about and what really matters. This distributional metaphysics is what I was talking about at the last moment. Think about your life, guys. It has a kind of structure. When you came into this world, there were a couple of people around you. Why were they distributed right there? Do you see that? Why were you born into that family, in that culture? Why were you born with that biological form? Do you see that? From a scientific point of view, all of this might be arbitrary, right? For Darwin, this is just a bunch of accidents. If the environment were different, you would be totally different. You know what I mean? It's accidental. So the distribution is meaningless and it's deflationary because it makes your life meaningless. But take the opposite side. If there is a God who is either identical to the world or who is, like Plato's God, something metaphysical that the world imitates, well, then that's very different. Everything in the world is exactly where it's supposed to be, and it's performing its function. This is what the Stoics believe. Epictetus and Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, they literally think that the world has a soul. And everything in the world is soulful, full of life, and full of reason and purpose. So your idea is just to be more conscious of your purpose and then get in line with your natural function. Become more conscious of who you truly are, what your reason is, and then try and get in harmony with nature that way. Suffering comes from being out of harmony and out of sync with nature, and true tranquility and peace comes from being in harmony with nature. All right? All right. Another big question. This distributional metaphysics is very deep. So for example, what is the distribution of metaphysical and eternal qualities such as beauty and goodness and truth and perfection in your own life and in the world? Think about that. Some religions say the truth and God and beauty and reality were all compressed, and they're all to be found between the years 0 and 33 BCE in Galilee. That's where truth is. That's where reality is. It can't be anywhere else. It's distributed strictly in Jewish culture under a certain period in which it was ruled by the Roman Empire, and Joseph and Mary gave birth to reality, and that reality existed for 33 years in Galilee. Does that sound ridiculous to you, or does it sound quite right? I'm not asking you to answer it, but you see what I'm doing, right? Yes, religion has a lot to offer. It enriches our experience of ourselves. It makes life meaningful. But there are also some bad things about religion too. When it gets exclusive and judgmental, right? You start saying, the truth is all distributed in my church. On this highway, you make a left, make a right. There's the truth right there. It's distributed right there. The one true God is distributed in this culture at this time in this geographical area. Now, does that make sense? I don't know. Maybe God is invisible and we'll never understand him and he never appears. Or maybe God does appear because he can do whatever he wants, right? But really? Are you going to tell me that Jesus is God and Krishna can't be? Well, if God can do whatever he wants and he's infinite, can we limit God? Can we put him in a box and say, only Jesus contains God? He cannot be distributed anywhere outside of Jesus. I'm not saying don't believe in Jesus. I'm not saying believe in him. I'm saying think about the implications of what you're saying. Do you see what I'm saying? Is this making sense? All right. All right. Yeah, distributional metaphysics. The loss of a loved one. Why did it happen when it happened? A bad breakup. Why did it happen when it happened? A period of disease. Why did it happen when it happened? Financial struggles. Same. Think about perspectivism, guys. Think about how your consciousness is always subjective and from a certain perspective or point of view. The view you have is not only relative to you and private, but it is integral to you and your consciousness. And therefore, it characterizes you just as much as it characterizes the object of your consciousness. So open-mindedness and critical thinking are only good from a certain point of view. And maybe one of the best practices in philosophy is constantly to be shifting perspectives so that you can enrich yourself, give yourself new horizons, and you don't get stuck stereotyping the world because you keep looking at it from the same perspective. Do you see that? All right. Idealism. Guys, I asked a very deep question when we started talking about the mind. Remember I said if you look around, what do you see? You see what? Bodies, right? These classmates of yours, if you really get technical, they're not persons or whatever, they're just bodies. That's what you see. So bodies are what appear. But if bodies are what appear, then what's not appearing? What's the incomplete part of the person we're not seeing? The mind, exactly. So one story you can tell about this problem of mind-body problem, which is related to metaphysics, is the appearing world only gives us bodies, but that's only half of what a person is or less. What about that other mysterious, interesting person? What about the part of the person that has emotion and feeling and sentiment and love and hope? Are bodies capable of doing all that heavy work? And then let's flip it. What if I'm completely wrong? What if it's the opposite? What if what really appears is minds, right? What if mind is not a thing, but a set of activities? Think about perception, memory, consciousness, attention. What if that's what's really going on right now? You're conscious of your environment, you're attending to it, and you're perceiving it. And so your mind is what really appears, these ideas that you perceive. And so if you look at your fellow classmate, what you see is not a body at all. What you perceive is an idea in your own mind. And guess what, guys? That means that the only real mind that you know is your own, and you only have an idea or a representation of other people in your mind. And so that raises the possibility of something very scary called solipsism. Solipsism is the idea that you are the only mind you have evidence for, and you don't have evidence for the minds of others. It's a very deep problem for metaphysics and for ethics as well. So what's the distribution of eternal beauty and goodness and truth and perfection in your own life and the world? How conscious are you of each of these virtues and values? How much do you care for them or care about them? And how much should you care? What we're doing right now, I want to suggest to you the possibility that we're not just doing academics or being smart right now. We're fellowshipping, we're sharing testimony. There's something heart to heart or soul to soul going on. And we're actually, by being open-minded, we're being affirmative of each other's humanity, and we're creating a basis for academics and even ministry. All right? All right. So it's an interesting possibility with this idealism, right? Idealism is the idea that, hey, instead of what's real being the mind and then the matter is what appears, you can flip it and then you can look at it the other way. What's real might be the mind, and then matter is only what appears, right? The other way, we took the body as real, and then the mind may or may not appear, kind of like God. But what if you flip it? What if the mind is what's real, and then matter, its status is what's hard to establish? Because whenever you look at matter, you're perceiving it. And when you look away, you don't perceive it. So it gets interesting. Does matter really exist? Or is it all just an idea in your mind? There's a philosopher called Berkeley. He was an immaterialist. He said matter does not exist. All that exists is the activity of the perception of ideas. And that's it, guys. So I want to suggest to you that in an age of information, like we've got now, why would you take a course with me? What value could I add? If I just repeat information to you and examine you on that information, does that really enrich you? No, you can look at Wikipedia or something like that for that. You can watch YouTube videos. I feel like my job is to enrich you, give you something that you can't find on YouTube or on Wikipedia. And now it gets serious. How creative are you? And how creative is philosophy? Remember we said philosophy might be about changing perspectives? Well, every time you change a perspective, that's kind of an artistic move, right? What do artists do? Painters, sculptors, they look at things from certain perspectives. So, we're talking about the value of your life, right? In existentialism. Well, guess what? What if the value of your life depends on you and how creative you are? What if your life is a work of art and who's the artist? Who do you think? Some philosophers will say life is a work of art and there's a certain person who's the artist of that work of art. Who do you think they're talking about? It could be God, but let's take God out, not the religious people. Who else is left over as the artist of their own lives? Yourself, exactly, guys. Very exciting. You make the meaning of your life. Very interesting possibility. I want you to think deeply about that. So you can constantly be sculpting and painting and shaping life to give it the form and content and meaning and value that you want it to have. If matter can influence matter through forces like gravity and electromagnetism, then what about mind influencing mind? or character influencing character. Guys, this is deep metaphysics, right? Newton discovered the force of gravity, and he saw certain laws or equations could express that law or that relationship between pieces of matter. But if you get metaphysical, you start to wonder, well, wait a minute. If these things called minds or souls or gods or whatever, if they also exist and they're plural, there's pluralism, there are many of them, then under what conditions do two minds really connect? Is it possible? Can they really come into contact the way two physical things can? How do they communicate? Do they communicate at all? Are they isolated from one another? Is solipsism true? These are deep things you need to think about. I know I'm rushing through this, we're almost done. Last thing I wanted to ask you guys, I have some news. I've been doing some research about our course recordings. So remember the first day of class, I said to you, hey, this is technically property. It's a specific type of property called intellectual property, right? Not all property is physical, some of it is ideas. Well, this would be intellectual property. So I did a little research and I found out its legal status for the purposes of our kind of class. And it seems like because the majority of the work is by me, and also because most of your images are not showing up in it, and your voices are barely recognizable and identifiable, technically it seems like this legally would be my own personal property. However, because I feel like we're having this experience together and we're fellowshipping, one idea I wanted to suggest to you is whether or not you would approve of us donating this class experience together to free online resources like YouTube or others, where others can also learn from our experience as we learn together through the semester. So yeah, I've established its technical legal status, but I still, out of respect for you, I want to share with you what I'm thinking about doing with it. And I want to get a feel for whether or not that's something you would like us to do. I would kind of title it, class of 2020 intro or something like that. And then we would share with them a lot of the stuff we're exploring. So I just want to get a feel for the class. How many people would be interested in that kind of donation from our class and our university to like YouTube? Just raise your hand if you think you would like that. Okay, great. So definitely the people who attend asynchronously, they're not showing up in any way, so we don't have to ask them. But out of respect, I'm going to send a nice little note telling them about what I'm thinking about. And I think I'll wait until the semester is completely over. And then I think about how to edit the videos and things like that. And I don't plan for you guys to do any presentations or anything. So neither your voice nor your image should appear here. And that's what technically gives it the status of my legal property. But nevertheless, this is an experience that I've had with you. I want to share it with you and I want to share it with others. And I want to give the credit to everyone together. Sound cool? All right, great guys. I'm done. All right, now we can focus on the lecture notes. I just hope you guys realize what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make this experience as rich and dense as possible, and then let you go off and think your own thing and do your own thing, and then enrich whatever you already have with what I'm offering. You see where things are going? All right, let's get started. Lecture notes, okay. Okay, introduction to philosophy. We've been introducing philosophy for two weeks now, Christ. Okay, we've been introducing philosophy for a while, but this is really gonna condense everything and point you in the right direction for where we're going, all right? So I'm gonna try and be fast because we have 30 minutes. Maybe we can get through a 4-page document in 30 minutes. A lot of this is gonna be repetition. So introduction to philosophy. We're now following what's on the projector. Introduction to philosophy. Lecture 1, introduction. Some mysteries that are central to the humanities. That's how I'm introducing what we're about to do. Why am I putting it that way? Why am I using the word mystery and why am I using the word humanity? It's not arbitrary. Remember what I was telling you about the scientific revolution? Do you remember we talked about that the first day of class? Can you remember what the scientific revolution is? What is it? The cultural revolution, right? What happened during that cultural revolution? Excellent. That's exactly right. Yeah, exactly. So what happened is, as culture became more and more scientific, it started, quote unquote, solving a lot of mysteries about the world and about us. Our anatomy, our physiology, so many things about us became clear. There were things that science did that philosophy could never do. Philosophy doesn't know anything about carbon or, DNA, silicon, barium, boron. Philosophy didn't even predict any of that. It didn't come close to predicting it. Science became an authority on so many aspects of our world. But there was some residue left over. Yes, after the scientific revolution took over, and then universities became research universities, and they came together. When the universities become research universities, and then the sciences do all that expertise stuff, what happens? You have specialization, right? Each university has its own department of science, of physics, chemistry, biology. Now you have hyper-specialization and hyper-professionalism. So at some point, science makes all this progress, and things become standardized, maybe even dogmatic, and then they become a bit stale. Science sees its horizons, and it begins to realize its limits. And then you start to realize that this thing called being a human being, there's a lot left over. Even after science has exhausted itself, there's still domains of what it is to be human that are left over. There are still mysteries about being human, right? And those mysteries that are left over are not found in the sciences, but they're found in what we call what? Not the sciences, but what else do you find at universities? You have the sciences and what? The humanities. So the humanities preserves those mysteries about us in the world that are left over after science tries its best. Here are some of them. God and religion. Guys, how can science study something like God? And how can science, as a culture, attack religion? I want to suggest to you that if anyone thinks that science is necessarily and automatically opposed to religion, they're not very refined and they're not very conscious. The best scientists in history were extremely religious. Galileo was very religious. He got in trouble with the church. When the church rebuked him, he recanted. Copernicus, very religious. Newton, very religious. Michael Faraday, for electricity, very religious. Max Planck, who kind of invented quantum mechanics, super religious. Even the mathematicians like Kurt Gödel were extremely religious. I'm just putting that out there so that people don't think that being intellectual means having some attitude towards God. Like, I know you don't exist, I don't see you. That is a very unsophisticated way to think about God. I'm not saying God exists, I'm not saying he doesn't exist. I'm just saying, to say that faith and reason necessarily clash can be a very blunt and rude way of thinking. Let's move on. Mind and body. I just told you that it's a really big puzzle what the relationship between these two things are. What are minds and what are bodies? And in what relationship do they stand to each other? It's a mystery. We don't know if God exists. We don't know how many gods there are. We don't know if God is Ares or God is Krishna or God is Aphrodite. Maybe God is Yahweh. Maybe God is Allah. We don't know. I mean, you have like Pythagorean theorem as a proof. Can anyone prove that the Holy Spirit is really God and not Jesus? Or that Yahweh is really God and not Krishna? Same thing with mind and body. Can anyone really prove that the mind isn't identical to the body? What if someone said mind just is patterns of neural activity in certain regions of the brain and certain hemispheres? How would you prove them right or wrong? On what basis and using what criteria? How would you prove someone wrong who says the body is one thing, the mind is another thing? There are two substances in the world, minds and bodies, and we got to figure out not whether they exist, we know that, but we got to figure out how they interact. If there are minds and they are immaterial and there are bodies that are material, okay, simple thing. If I raise my hand, we tend to think that my mind made me do that. I decided in my mind to raise my hand, and then my hand reacted. But that assumes that my mind somehow influenced my body. But how can a force influence something that it can't even come in contact with? The mind has no shape, size, color, location. The mind has no material properties. So the very idea of contact doesn't make sense. You see that? What kinds of things exist? Minds and bodies. And what relationship do they stand to each other? Some people reject minds altogether. Some people are what we call eliminative materialists. Guys, these are people who say we are zombies. They say you have no beliefs, you have no desires, you're not conscious, you have no mental states at all. Mental states don't even exist. They believe that when neuroscience is done properly, all we will discover is very sophisticated patterns of neurochemical activity, and we'll somehow realize that, oh, this is what all that emotion and belief and desire really was. We're going to see there are some serious problems with that. It's optimistic in one sense, right? Because it's saying, look, we humans, we've only studied things for a few years, a few centuries. We don't know much. And we discovered that witches don't really exist. We discovered that phlogiston doesn't really exist. We've discovered so much that we've corrected later. You see that? All right. Free will and determinism. Guys, I know I'm repeating this, but this is central to the human experience. Do we have a free will, and does it matter? And are we fully determined, and does that matter? There are institutions built around the idea that we have free will. Punishment, both punishment within the criminal justice system and punishment outside of the criminal justice system. It's obvious, right? If someone commits a crime, we assume that they should be punished because they were responsible for it. But if they were responsible for it, that's implying that they had agency. They actually had the capacity to do it. You cannot be made responsible for something that you cannot even do. You see that? If the possibility of doing it doesn't exist, then how can you be made responsible for it? If you ought to do something, then that implies that you can do it. The idea of someone saying you ought to do something that you can't even do is preposterous. Does that make sense? All right, let's move on. The problem of personal identity. Guys, who are you? Are you your mind, or are you your body, or are you both, or are you some other thing other than minds and bodies? What on earth, if you are a mind or a soul, what on earth is that? Remember, all we have is our senses, right? Now, do we ever see the soul? Do we see other people's souls? Do we see our own soul? Maybe. Maybe we don't see our soul, but maybe we are aware of certain activities, like I was saying before, perception, consciousness. Maybe these activities are what we are aware of, but we're not aware of an object that is our soul. Maybe not that. Something to think about. And similarly, you have a body. Let's assume that you are your body. There's a huge problem there, right? Every 7 years, what happens to your body? Think about the cells you're made of. Are they staying the same? There's a lot going on, right? So if we say that you are your body, but we change the composition of your body almost thoroughly every 7 years, I mean, this is one of those myths. We don't know what really happens, but it's convenient to think about. Let's assume that we're true. There certainly are some changes going on in your body. How much change is sufficient to make you not be you anymore? Under what conditions do you persist as the person you are? That's a crazy problem. Number 5, values. How do we figure out whether or not something is beautiful, ugly, good, bad, right, wrong, true, false, whether it's merely an appearance or whether it's a reality, and whether it's perfect or imperfect. That's crazy. How do you figure that out? And how do you figure it out in a way that's subjective? I mean, objective, I mean. Subjectively, we know. We all have our tastes. Some people like Ariana Grande, others like Taylor Swift. Right? Is it possible to take those two values and weigh them and then say, oh, clearly Ariana Grande is better? Or do you think everyone is imprisoned in their own value system and there's no way out? And what are the implications of this in a democracy, for example, where everyone is voting their own preferences? What does it mean? Knowledge and skepticism. Guys, what was that ancient theory of knowledge that we started off the class with? Do you remember what that ancient theory of knowledge was? What is knowledge? Okay, let's break it down this way. If you have a claim or a proposition or a sentence before you, and you utter that sentence, you say, I believe that students are the best. You're claiming it. So let's break it down. What's really happening? Let's start psychologically. I claim that if you propose a proposition, your soul or your mind is in a certain attitude towards that claim. Can you remember what we call that attitude? It's called a propositional attitude. But it's a very familiar word. We use it all the time. If you say students are the best, what's the name of the attitude you have towards that thing if you're claiming it? Any ideas? You believe it. That's what a belief is, right? If you claim something, it's safe to assume that you believe it, at a minimum. There might be more requirements in order to reach knowledge, but definitely it's kind of necessary that if you're going to know something, then you must believe it. I mean, could you know something that you don't even believe? Maybe you could. I don't know. That's a mystery, right? Can you know something that you don't even believe? Can you know stuff that you have no reason to believe? Can you know stuff that's not even true or conventionally true? Anyway, let's assume you have a belief. In addition to the belief, what else needs to happen in order to qualify as knowledge? You have a belief about a certain proposition, and what else? What else is necessary? Or is the belief sufficient? If you believe something, does that make it true? Are you comfortable with that? Whatever I believe is true. What do you think? Whatever I believe is true. Are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable with someone else saying, whatever I believe is true? If a president said, whatever I believe is true, would you be okay with that? On Twitter, he says, or she says, whatever I say is true. Would he get canceled or no? Yeah, some people would be like, no, there's more. Belief is not enough, although maybe certain religions believe that belief is enough, right? I don't know. Do religions believe that faith is the same as knowledge, or is it something else? Is faith actually the absence of knowledge and kind of a hostility towards knowledge? Something to think about. Anyway, in addition to belief, we also need truth. So the belief needs to be true, or the proposition needs to be true. But just because a belief is true still feels a bit insufficient. Both belief and truth are necessary. But if someone just believes something true, some philosophers like Plato and Socrates suggest there's something missing there. In addition to believing something true, you also need to believe something's true for a good reason to believe it. And that feels a bit more final, complete, sufficient, all right? And then finally, guys, what I've been sharing with you a lot, the meaning of life. So those values I was telling you about, perfect, imperfect, ugly, beautiful, those things don't just apply to values or objects, they also apply to what? If you zoom out of your life and you look at it, it applies to what? What do you think?
I agree with that.
Okay. Beautiful, ugly, good, bad, perfect, imperfect, apparent, real, true, false. Those are value judgments, right? And typically we apply them to objects or actions or people. But what if you zoom out of yourself and you look at your as a whole? What also could also be judged using those things? Existentialism.
Like your whole person, like society.
From when you were born until when you die. That whole thing. What do we call that? Your what? Your existence, yeah, or your life, right? So the meaning of life is all about, hey, is my life beautiful? Is my life ugly? Is it good or bad? Is it perfect or imperfect? How should we value it? What value does it have? Under what conditions is it worth living or not worth living? Okay, guys. Oh, we got 15 minutes. Let's go. What is philosophy, guys? Very deep question. You got to think about this the whole course, the whole semester. What is philosophy? Is philosophy just a staunch institutional orthodoxy adhering to a fixed set of doctrines, dogmas, and creeds? So is philosophy all about taking a position and then getting in the trenches and fighting for that position like a military general? Once you assume that God exists and you are a theist, that's it. No more curiosity, no more wonder, no more critical thinking. I will do everything in my power to spread theism and decrease atheism. And is that what a philosopher is? Something for you to think about. Secondly, is it a set of sophisticated, critical opinions about a stock of canonical topics central to the humanities? God, mind, personal identity, free will, ethics, and epistemology. Is it about just being humble and not saying you have the truth, but saying, look, I have an opinion, and I've sophisticated it using some open-mindedness and some critical thinking. And you know what? That's about the best I can do. And you know what? I think that's the best we can do as human beings. That's what philosophy is. All right? Let's move on. Is philosophy a set of methods, techniques, and approaches to any topic? Stuff like rational approaches to topic. Rationalism is like, hey, just by using reason in my mind, I can figure out all sorts of stuff about myself and the world. Just by thinking about concepts that are properly defined, I can figure out whether I exist, the world exists, God exists, you name it. I don't really need to observe the world. Empiricism is the opposite. It's about experience. Experience is the source of ideas and knowledge. All this thinking without actually observing the world is useless, idle, and pointless, right? Scholasticism, that was the type of philosophy they practiced during the medieval ages. Criticism, criticizing something means looking at its assumptions and seeing if they're really true or valid. Dialectics, that's what Socrates is doing. You engage with someone and you practice a Socratic method. You say, hey, you're a priest, right? So you must know a lot about holiness, right? Okay, let's go. Let's see how much you know. Let's see whether you have the right or the entitlement to what you think you know. So that's it. That's a third possibility. Methods, techniques, approaches. You're not committed to any doctrine or any conclusion. It's just an approach or a method, and that's all you're dedicated to is the style of philosophizing or the method or the approach. Next, a mode of discourse, dialogue, or discussion, featuring reasons, examples, distinctions, and principles so as to offer plausible accounts of different phenomena, issues, or solutions to theoretical and practical problems. I need to take a breath. That was a mouthful. Jesus. I don't even know what all that means, but I think you need to think about it. Maybe that's what philosophy is. And then finally, is philosophy just a culture, a style, a lifestyle of curiosity and wonder and imagination and speculation about life and the world and everything in it and beyond it? that often leads to speculations, guesses, and suggestions about the nature of things in which accuracy and precision and fallibility feature heavily. Guys, I'm not trying to sound sophisticated or like I know big words. I'm just trying to get you to see that philosophy, like all things in life, is complex, you know? I'm not saying any one of these is all right. Maybe there's a lot of overlap. Maybe there's a little bit of truth in all of them, but I want you to think deeply about what it is. Let's move on. The modus operandi of philosophy, its MO, how it operates, how it rolls. It rolls mainly by questioning things. Guys, one of the best things about philosophy in my experience isn't the answers. Because different schools of thought and different approaches are going to have different answers. One of the most beautiful things about philosophy is a well-formulated and very precise question. You see that? You see that? Sometimes asking the right question is more of a eye-opener and consciousness thing than the answer. Because what does an answer typically do? It concludes, right? So there's no more curiosity, no more wonder. But when you really formulate a proper question, that enriches the culture so much. So questioning is central to philosophy. In addition to questioning, there is also rational argumentation. Rational argumentation. This is a big, big feature of philosophy. What do we mean by rational argumentation? Well, remember what I told you an argument is colloquially or just casually? I got in a fight with her. She said my team sucks. I said your team sucks. We tried to persuade each other through heated verbal disputes and fighting and shouting, and we had a big argument last night. Okay, yeah, you tried to persuade her, but you weren't doing it very philosophically. You were doing it kind of like an animal. For philosophy, an argument is the opposite. Yeah, you're trying to persuade someone, but rationally, clinically, cool, calm, collected. Say, hey man, I disagree with you, or I think I disagree with you, but let's make sure. What are you saying? Are you saying that because Socrates is a man, and because Socrates is mortal, that implies, no, okay, let's think of it this way. Aristotle put the syllogism, all men are mortal, and Socrates is a man. So what does that imply? All men are mortal, and Socrates is a man. So what does that imply? That Socrates is immortal. That's an argument right there, right? So, what are we doing when we argue? We're trying to persuade each other that's true, but there's something even deeper going on. We're just trying to be transparent to ourselves. What am I even really saying? Yeah, I think Socrates is mortal, but why do I think that? Well, for one, every man I've ever met is mortal. Now, what's my sample size? That's an issue, right? Someone can disagree with you there. Maybe there are men that are not mortal, but every man you've heard of you think is mortal. And in addition to that, you have some reason to believe that Socrates is mortal. Maybe that's false. But when you combine those two and you assume they're correct, then this becomes a valid argument, maybe not sound, but valid, because the conclusion follows from the premises. The two earlier statements support the conclusion necessarily. And that's a practice that really enriches philosophy by bringing transparency and clarity, and everyone has a common reference. You see that? Having a common reference is what definition is all about. Because if the same word means two different things to two different people, you're not really arguing. You don't even know whether you're referring to the same thing. All right? Critical discussion, very important. Critical discussion is what we're doing in this class. For everything that you believe, we assume it to be true, right? And then now that it has the status of an assumption, we question its validity. Let's assume what you're saying is true. Have you thought that it implies this or that or the other? Are you comfortable with those theoretical commitments? If not, you might want to revise your assumptions or your hypotheses. And then finally, there's systematic presentation. Presenting material systematically helps a lot. The periodic table, why is it so beautiful? Why is it so good? Because it's so systematic and it's so presentable. Just in the form of the presentation, there's intelligibility. You see patterns, right? You see rows that correspond with periods, and then you see columns that correspond with groups. In biology, you have classes, kingdoms, phyla, genera, right? You have all these organizations of all living things, and just the organization alone, heightens the intelligibility. Guys, these divisions of philosophy, you know all of them. Logic is the study of arguments and reasoning. It's the study of the different types of arguments, and those are mainly deductive and inductive. And I'm going to prepare a sheet of paper that summarizes this very crisply in 1 or 2 pages. Metaphysics is the study of reality, free will, God, personhood. Epistemology is the study of the conditions under which we have knowledge. Axiology is the study of the origin, nature, justification, and the types of values. So we've got ethics, what makes things right or wrong. We've got aesthetics, what makes things beautiful or ugly. And we've got existentialism, which says, what is the value of life? What makes life worth living? Typical questions that concern philosophers. What is thinking? What is reasoning? What is an argument? What kinds of arguments are there? What distinguishes a good argument from a bad one? When are we justified in believing the conclusion of an argument? What is it about thinking and reasoning and argumentation that guarantees access to knowledge and truth? Secondly, is it possible to know anything? Look at dogmatism or skepticism or Gnosticism. In virtue of what do we know anything? Is perception alone enough to know something, or do you got to reason about it? Can we prove anything? What is proof? Is proof necessary for knowledge? If you can't prove something, does that mean you don't know it? Can we ever know anything without eliminating the mystery of the subject matter under study? Guys, God is infinite and eternal and beautiful and powerful. Somehow we have the sense that we know all those things about him, but at the same time, if he's truly infinite, we can never really know him. We're finite and he's infinite. So that raises a question, can you ever really know something that's really mysterious? Life is full of mystery. No one knew COVID was coming or whatever, you know? Can you really know life when you can't even predict something as simple as COVID? All right. What is the essence of thinking? Is it something like implication or something else? What are the sources of knowledge? Is it our senses? Is it our reason? What is truth? Can we know the external world? When you look around, do you see just ideas in your own mind? Or can you really know that, hey, this is objective? It's not just something that has a status in my mind. It's not just psychological. There's something out there. And what are the sources of knowledge? What about revelation? If Prophet Muhammad says Allah revealed himself to him in the Quran through a series of revelations, is that the same or different from an empirical revelation or a rational one? What is value? Is value an object? You know, guys, this is extremely, extremely rich. We are running out of time. So I'm going to end here. Please look this over in detail on your own. I might cover some relevant parts of it in the next class. It's very dense, it's very rich. It'll really help you with those projects you have to work on, the essays. I'm going to be selective about which ones I cover because you do have them now and you're responsible for them. So I might not cover all of it, but I'll just I'll select certain things to think about, right? Let me go to page number 4, for example. That's what we'll conclude with. Example 2. It's on the projector now. Example 2. What is the goal of religion and spirituality? This is just an example of what philosophy can do. Is it communion with a divine personage like Christ or Krishna or Orpheus? Is it deliverance, liberation, redemption, salvation from suffering and wretchedness? Is it simplicity, contentment, and tranquility of soul? Is it worship and praise and glorification of a deity? Is it robust health, in particular mental health? Is it to help us to bear the vicissitudes and the changes of fortune with nobility and magnanimity? Is it to cultivate a sense of what is truly valuable, worthy, and sacred in life, and to give us a taste for what really matters and what we should care about. Guys, all I want you to really appreciate at this point is that philosophy is a very rich phenomenon. It has a lot to offer. Some people like me are going to spend the rest of their lives on it. And some people like you are going to be introduced to it and you might never visit it again. But that puts a lot of responsibility on me. If this is how you're going to interact with this subject, and this might be the only time, I want to make it really rich, really dense, and it's going to mean a little bit of experimentation for me. As you can see, I have a lot to offer and time doesn't always permit. But for next class, please read the ontological argument. We are going to go through that. It's very simple, but it's very rich, and we'll figure out some way to advance in the class. I am now ending the recording. We're going to go ahead and end the recording now. Okay. Not stop video. How do you end recording? There we go. And I'm going to take attendance.